Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. Your heart stops beating. Your brain activity flatlines. Doctors declare you clinically dead. But in that silent darkness, something strange happens. You are still aware. You float above your body. You see doctors rushing, machines beeping, and even conversations being spoken in the room. Moments later, you return, alive again, carrying with you an experience that feels more real than reality itself. Stories like these, known as near-death experiences, have fascinated humanity for centuries. But here's the question that refuses to die. Are these simply tricks of the brain, or proof that the soul exists? That is exactly what scientists around the world have been trying to uncover. And some of their findings may surprise you, because what started as spiritual belief has slowly begun to enter the realm of scientific investigation. And the deeper we look, the stranger it becomes. For most of human history, the soul was not a question, it was an answer. Ancient civilizations, from Egypt to India, spoke of a life force that lived beyond the body. Philosophers like Plato described the soul as eternal, while Eastern traditions viewed it as a spark of universal consciousness. Yet, for centuries, science stayed silent, choosing instead to study what could be seen, touched, and measured. But that silence started to crack in the last century, when researchers began to notice phenomena they could not fully explain. Cases of patients recalling details from moments when their brains had completely shut down. Children claiming to remember lives they never lived. And perhaps most intriguing of all, scientists discovering that consciousness itself may not be fully contained within the brain. Each of these mysteries pulled researchers toward a daring possibility. What if the soul is not just an idea, but a real part of our existence? And if that is true, then where is the proof? The first attempts to measure the soul began more than 100 years ago. In 1907, a physician named Duncan McDougall conducted an unusual experiment. He placed dying patients on a special scale, carefully measuring their body weight before and after death. To his astonishment, he claimed that each person lost about 21 grams at the moment of passing. McDougall boldly suggested that this was the weight of the human soul leaving the body. Of course, his methods were crude, and modern scientists dismissed his results as unreliable. But his experiment sparked something much larger, a scientific curiosity about whether the soul could, in some way, be studied. This was just the beginning, because as technology advanced, so too did our ability to peer into the mysteries of consciousness. And what researchers began to see challenged everything we thought we knew about life and death. Let's fast forward to modern times. Today, we can measure brain waves with incredible precision. We can scan neurons firing in real time. We can even track blood flow to the deepest parts of the mind. And yet, one question remains unanswered. Where does consciousness come from? According to neuroscience, your thoughts, feelings, and awareness are simply the result of chemical reactions inside the brain. But there's a problem. Even when scientists map every firing neuron, they still can't explain why you experience life the way you do, why you feel emotions, why you have a sense of self. This gap in understanding is called the hard problem of consciousness. And it has led some scientists to ask a radical question. Maybe the soul isn't a myth after all. Maybe it's the very essence of consciousness itself. If that's true, then the soul may not die when the body does. And some researchers believe we already have evidence to support this possibility. One of the most fascinating sources comes from near-death experiences. Patients who were clinically dead, no heartbeat, no brain activity, yet returned describing vivid encounters. Some recall moving through a tunnel of light. Others describe meeting loved ones who had passed away. And astonishingly, many report details from the hospital room that they could not have possibly known. For decades, doctors dismissed these stories as hallucinations, the brain's last flicker of activity. But then came a groundbreaking study known as the AWARE Project. Scientists placed hidden images in hospital rooms, symbols that could only be seen from above. If patients truly had out-of-body experiences, they might report seeing them. So what happened? In some cases, patients did indeed describe things from a perspective outside their body. Details that could not be explained by fading brain activity alone. Now, skeptics argue that the evidence is still inconclusive. But one thing is clear: these stories continue to challenge the idea that consciousness ends at death. And if consciousness can exist without the body, doesn't that sound very much like what we call the soul? Some scientists believe the key lies not in biology, but in physics, specifically quantum physics. At the subatomic level, reality behaves in ways that defy logic. Particles exist in multiple places at once. Observation itself changes outcomes. And somehow, everything is connected in ways we still don't fully understand. This has led to a bold idea: what if consciousness, and by extension the soul, operates on a quantum level? The theory, known as quantum consciousness, suggests that our awareness is not trapped inside the brain, but instead connected to the very fabric of the universe. If that is true, then death may not be the end at all. Instead, the soul might simply return to this universal field, like a drop of water rejoining the ocean. But is there actual science to support this? Or is it just philosophy dressed in physics? That's what we'll uncover next. When we talk about the soul, most people imagine something mystical, floating beyond the reach of science. Yet, the more researchers study consciousness, the more it begins to resemble a puzzle that refuses to be solved by biology alone. Neuroscience has mapped countless brain processes, but the very core of awareness remains just out of reach. And that gap is exactly where theories about the soul find space to grow. One of the boldest scientific attempts to explain consciousness comes from two well-known researchers: the physicist Sir Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Dr. Stuart Hameroff. Together, they proposed the orchestrated objective reduction theory, or simply orchestra-OR. According to them, consciousness isn't just the firing of neurons. It emerges from quantum processes inside tiny structures in brain cells called microtubules. In other words, your awareness may be linked to the same strange laws that govern subatomic particles. This theory is fascinating because it suggests consciousness is not produced by the brain in isolation. Instead, the brain acts more like a receiver, tuning into a universal field of information. If that is true, then what we call the soul could be this very field of consciousness that continues existing even when the body shuts down. But is there any evidence that such a connection exists? The answer may lie in what happens under anesthesia. Patients who go completely unconscious during surgery sometimes report flashes of awareness, or even vivid experiences, despite the brain being silenced by powerful drugs. These anomalies suggest that consciousness might not be fully dependent on normal brain activity. If consciousness can still flicker when the brain is offline, then where does that spark come from? Experiments have tried to test this. Researchers studying brain activity during anesthesia noticed strange patterns, bursts of coherence that resemble quantum processes. Some argue this could be the brain momentarily connecting with something deeper, something beyond physical mechanisms. Could it be that what we are glimpsing is the activity of the soul showing itself when the brain's ordinary chatter goes quiet? Skeptics, of course, push back. They argue that the orchestroir theory is highly speculative, that quantum processes are too delicate to survive the warm, noisy environment of the brain. But here's the twist. Recent studies in biology have revealed that quantum effects can play a role in surprising places, such as photosynthesis in plants or navigation in birds. If quantum processes can guide the behavior of cells and animals, why not also contribute to human consciousness? And if that's the case, then perhaps the soul is not a supernatural mystery at all, but a natural phenomenon waiting to be understood. But what happens to this consciousness when the body dies? That is where near-death research, reincarnation studies, and even strange cases of memory retention begin to offer intriguing clues. Take the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia. For decades, he investigated cases of children who claimed to remember past lives. These children not only described details of people they had never met, but sometimes bore birthmarks or physical traits that matched those individuals. Stevenson documented thousands of such cases, meticulously verifying names, locations, and events. He never claimed this proved reincarnation, but the evidence he gathered was difficult to dismiss. Imagine a child in rural India recalling the name of a village hundreds of miles away, describing relatives of a person who had died years earlier, and then leading investigators to that very family. Stories like these raise a haunting possibility that the soul may not only survive death, but also carry memories into a new body. Could the soul be the missing link in explaining these mysteries? Critics suggest cultural influence, memory errors, or parental encouragement as explanations. And yet, in many cases, the depth of detail goes beyond simple imagination. Stevenson himself remained cautious, but his decades of research left behind a mountain of data that continues to provoke curiosity. If nothing else, these cases remind us that human consciousness may not be confined to one lifetime. But if the soul can travel between lives, what does that say about its nature? Parallel to this research, modern studies of cardiac arrest patients continue to produce strange results. In some documented cases, patients who were declared clinically dead not only reported floating above their bodies, but accurately described medical instruments, clothing of doctors, and even conversations that occurred during their resuscitation. One man in particular described a sound made by a machine that was only audible from behind his head, a position he could not have been in. The fact that he recalled this detail challenges the idea that such experiences are mere hallucinations. But here is the most intriguing question. If the brain is completely shut down, how is it possible for memories of such clarity to be formed? Memories require activity in the hippocampus, yet when blood flow stops, neurons cannot function. And yet, somehow, patients return with vivid recollections. Could this mean that consciousness, and by extension the soul, is recording experiences outside the brain itself? Some scientists are beginning to think so. Dr. Sam Parnia, one of the world's leading researchers on near-death experiences, has conducted studies across hospitals, carefully analyzing patient accounts. While many remain skeptical, His findings suggest that consciousness may persist for minutes, even hours after death. If that is true, then the line between life and death may not be as clear as we once believed. And if consciousness can persist for minutes, could it also exist indefinitely? This question brings us back to quantum theory. If the soul is indeed connected to the quantum field, then death may simply be a transition. The consciousness detaches from the body but continues existing in a different form, like energy shifting states. Physics tells us energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed. Could the same principle apply to the soul? The idea may sound mystical, but it resonates with discoveries in modern physics. The universe itself is a web of energy and information, interconnected in ways we are only beginning to map. Some physicists propose that consciousness is a fundamental part of this fabric, not a byproduct of biology but a property of the universe itself. If so, then the soul is not confined to human existence. It is as old and vast as reality itself. And yet, science demands proof. While theories and anecdotes inspire curiosity, evidence must be measurable, repeatable, and observable. Researchers are now designing more sophisticated experiments to test these ideas. From studying brain activity during cardiac arrest to placing hidden targets in hospital rooms, the search for the soul has entered a new era of scientific exploration. The question is, will these experiments finally provide undeniable evidence? If they do, the implications would be profound. Our understanding of life, death, and the universe would change forever. But even if science cannot fully prove the existence of the soul, the growing body of evidence suggests that consciousness may not be as fragile as we once thought. And this leads to the next mystery. If the soul is real, where exactly does it go after death? If the soul exists, the next great question is perhaps the most haunting of all. Where does it go when the body dies? For centuries, religions have offered answers. Some speak of heaven and hell, others of reincarnation, and still others of the soul merging into a higher cosmic reality. Yet science demands more than belief. It seeks patterns, evidence, and mechanisms. And strangely enough, patterns are beginning to emerge. In many near-death accounts, people describe entering a tunnel or moving toward a brilliant light. This imagery is strikingly consistent across cultures, religions, and even among those who had no prior knowledge of such stories. But why would so many people, from different backgrounds and eras, share such similar experiences? Could it be that the soul follows a universal process after death, one that humans throughout history have glimpsed in these moments between life and beyond? Neurologists argue that the tunnel of light is caused by the brain shutting down. As oxygen levels drop, the visual field narrows, producing the sensation of moving through a tunnel. But this explanation falls short when patients report details from outside their bodies at the same time. If it were only a trick of vision, how could they also describe events happening in the room? This tension between brain science and conscious experience continues to puzzle researchers, leaving open the possibility that the tunnel of light may not just be an illusion. Some believe this tunnel represents a transition stage, the soul leaving the body and entering another state of existence. In Tibetan Buddhism, the bardo is described as an intermediate realm between death and rebirth, filled with visions, lights, and encounters with spiritual beings. Ancient Egyptians spoke of the duat, a passage the soul must navigate before reaching eternal life. Even Christian and Islamic traditions describe a kind of journey of the soul after death. The similarities are striking, hinting at a deeper, perhaps universal truth? Could it be that these cultural stories are not mere metaphors, but reflections of a real process experienced by countless souls? If that's the case, then maybe science should not dismiss these reports as folklore. Instead, it may be time to look at them as data, consistent patterns of human experience that demand explanation. But how can one measure what happens after death? That is the challenge researchers are now attempting to meet. Modern studies are increasingly turning toward monitoring patients at the edge of death. Hospitals have begun using highly sensitive EEG machines to record brain activity during cardiac arrest. Surprisingly, in some cases, bursts of organized activity appear even after the brain has been declared clinically inactive. It's as though the mind briefly awakens in the moments of death, raising the question, could this be the soul detaching itself from the physical brain? These bursts of energy often occur at the exact time patients later describe leaving their bodies. For skeptics, this might seem like coincidence. But for those who see the possibility of the soul, it appears as a scientific fingerprint of departure. If consciousness truly survives outside the brain, these final bursts of activity may be the key to capturing its escape. But if we can capture these signals, what will they reveal about what lies beyond? Another fascinating approach has come from experiments with terminal patients who report visions in the days before death. Many describe seeing deceased relatives, radiant beings, or even landscapes of extraordinary beauty. Nurses and doctors in palliative care frequently observe these experiences and note how they comfort the dying. Science has long ignored these visions, labeling them hallucinations. But a growing number of researchers suggest they may be windows into a transition process. Could the dying be glimpsing the very dimension the soul is about to enter? And then there are outlier cases. Stories of people who were declared dead for hours or even days, only to return and speak of extraordinary journeys. While these accounts are rare and often controversial, they add fuel to the mystery. One such case involved a man in India who was found lifeless for over 18 hours, yet revived with vivid descriptions of traveling to another realm and being told it was not yet his time. Medical science struggles to explain such events, but they continue to emerge across the world. Are they fabrications or glimpses of a reality science has not yet mapped? If the soul does journey beyond death, then the next mystery is its destination. Some researchers propose that consciousness may rejoin a larger universal field, as suggested by quantum theories. In this view, death is not an ending, but a reunion, a drop of water returning to the ocean of universal awareness. This aligns with mystical traditions that speak of oneness, enlightenment, and unity with the cosmos. If true, then the soul is not lost, it is absorbed back into the very fabric of reality. But how can we ever know for certain? Interestingly, even scientists who don't believe in the soul often admit that human consciousness has properties that are hard to explain. Dr. Eben Alexander, a neurosurgeon, famously changed his mind after experiencing his own near-death journey during a coma. Initially skeptical, he now believes consciousness continues beyond the body, describing in detail a world of light and connection he encountered. His testimony has been both celebrated and criticized, but it reflects a growing number of medical professionals who have personally faced mysteries that challenge scientific materialism. Could it be that the very people trained to see death as an ending are beginning to recognize it as a doorway? Critics will argue that until science can measure, reproduce, and verify these claims, they remain stories. But even so, stories can hold power. Stories repeated across time and culture often point to truths waiting to be uncovered. When thousands of patients, across decades and continents, describe similar experiences at death's edge, perhaps we should listen more closely. Could humanity be on the verge of discovering that the soul is not only real, but universal? If so, the implications are staggering. It would mean that life after death is not merely a hope or belief, but a fundamental part of existence. It would suggest that the universe itself is built with consciousness at its core, and that every one of us carries within us a fragment of something eternal. But before we embrace such a conclusion, we must ask, if the soul is real, can we detect it directly, here and now? If science could detect the soul directly, it would be the most groundbreaking discovery in human history. For centuries, such an idea seemed impossible. How could one measure something invisible, intangible, and perhaps beyond physical reality? Yet, as technology advances, researchers are beginning to design experiments that come remarkably close to this daring goal. The question is, what have they found? One fascinating line of inquiry involves the study of biophotons, tiny flashes of light emitted by living cells. Our bodies actually give off a weak glow, invisible to the naked eye but measurable with sensitive instruments. Some scientists have suggested that these biophotons may be linked to consciousness, acting like a communication system within the brain. If true, then the soul may not be entirely immaterial. It could be tied to subtle forms of energy radiating from our very cells. But could these faint glimmers actually reveal something about life beyond the body? Experiments have shown that the human brain produces more biophotons than any other organ, particularly in regions linked to thought and awareness. During moments of meditation or intense focus, biophoton activity increases. And intriguingly, researchers have found that these particles can behave in quantum ways, showing coherence and even entanglement. Could it be that the soul is woven into this mysterious light, guiding and recording our conscious experiences? Skeptics argue that biophotons are simply byproducts of chemical reactions in the body. But others believe they may represent a bridge between biology and consciousness itself. If the soul is indeed connected to light within us, then death may not extinguish it completely. Instead, it might release this inner light into the universe, carrying our awareness with it. And if so, perhaps the ancient stories of souls glowing, shining, or ascending in light are not myths, but glimpses of a hidden truth. But how far can this light carry us beyond the body? Another approach to studying the soul has come through research into out-of-body experiences. Some individuals claim they can intentionally leave their bodies during deep meditation or altered states of consciousness. Scientists have tested such claims in controlled settings, placing hidden targets in locations that could only be seen from above. While results remain debated, a few experiments reported individuals describing these targets accurately. Could this be evidence that the soul can travel independently of the body, even when not near death? This possibility raises profound questions. If the soul can move beyond the body at will, then death itself may not be required to glimpse its reality. Practices like astral projection, lucid dreaming, and deep spiritual meditation may all be ways of accessing the same phenomenon. Cultures worldwide, from shamans in South America to yogis in India, have long described such journeys. Could these ancient practices hold keys to understanding what science is only now beginning to investigate? Of course, Many scientists remain cautious, demanding rigorous evidence before accepting such claims. Yet the persistence of these experiences across time, geography, and culture suggests something more than coincidence. People separated by thousands of years and miles still describe floating, traveling through realms, and feeling connected to something vast and luminous. The consistency itself is a kind of data, hinting that the soul may be a shared human reality waiting for scientific validation. But if it exists, what laws of nature allow it to operate? That brings us back to physics, the foundation of reality. Some physicists believe that information itself is fundamental to the universe. According to this view, matter and energy are secondary. What truly shapes reality is the storage and transfer of information. In fact, the famous physicist John Wheeler once said, "It from bit," suggesting that the physical world arises from informational processes. If consciousness is a form of information, then the soul may be the purest form of it, encoded into the fabric of the cosmos. Could this mean the soul is not something we have, but something we are, woven into reality itself? If so, then death may simply be the release of information back into the universe. Just as a computer program can be transferred to a new device, the essence of who we are may continue in another form, another place, or perhaps another body. This aligns with reincarnation stories, but also with theories of parallel universes, where consciousness may reappear in entirely different realities. If the soul is pure information, its possibilities are limitless. But if that's true, how could we ever prove it? Some researchers propose experiments using quantum entanglement. If the soul is linked to quantum states, then perhaps it can interact with the physical world in subtle ways measurable in the lab. Already, parapsychologists have studied phenomena like telepathy and remote viewing, which may hint at the soul's ability to connect beyond space and time. While mainstream science remains skeptical, a handful of studies suggest correlations too strong to ignore. Could it be that the soul has already left its fingerprints in experiments most have dismissed? And then there are the extraordinary cases of people who seem to carry unexplainable knowledge or abilities after near-death or mystical experiences. Some return with sudden musical talents, artistic skills, or languages they never studied. These transformations defy conventional neuroscience, which would expect brain damage, not enhancement, after such traumas. Could these sudden gifts be signs that the soul has accessed a deeper layer of reality, bringing back fragments of knowledge from beyond? Stories like these challenge not only science but our very sense of identity. If the soul can transcend death, carry memories, and return with new abilities, then who we are may be far more than our physical selves. It suggests that the human journey does not end at the grave, but continues in ways we are only beginning to imagine. And if that is true, then the question shifts from, does the soul exist? To what is its ultimate purpose? This is where philosophy and science converge. Some thinkers argue that the soul's purpose is to learn, evolve, and expand through multiple lifetimes. Others see it as a fragment of universal consciousness, experiencing itself through countless individual lives. From a scientific perspective, these ideas may sound speculative. Yet they resonate with discoveries in psychology, where personal growth, resilience, and transformation often emerge from near-death or mystical experiences. Could the soul's purpose be tied to the evolution of consciousness itself? If so, then life after death is not just survival, it is progress. The soul may be on a journey of growth, collecting experiences across lifetimes, learning the lessons of love, compassion, and wisdom. And if this is true, then each of our lives has a deeper meaning woven into the very fabric of existence. But if the soul evolves, then where is this evolution leading us? So, after following this long journey of science, philosophy, and mystery, we are left standing at the edge of a question that has lingered in human minds for centuries. Did scientists truly prove the existence of the soul? Or are we only scratching the surface of something far greater than science can measure? The answer may not be absolute, but the patterns and hints are too powerful to ignore. And perhaps it is in these mysteries themselves that the truth quietly hides. But what do these patterns really suggest when we put them all together? One of the most fascinating aspects of the search for the soul comes from neuroscience. Modern brain scans can show us exactly which parts of the brain light up when we feel emotions, make decisions, or even dream. But here's the strange part. None of these scans can tell us why we feel something in the first place. Scientists can measure activity, but not the essence behind it. This gap between brain activity and lived experience is where the idea of the soul often enters the discussion. Could it be that what we call the soul is the missing piece that connects measurable signals with the indescribable experience of being alive? And if so, how could we ever hope to test such a thing? Experiments into consciousness keep pushing this boundary. Take, for example, near-death experiences. People who have been clinically dead for minutes, sometimes longer, often return with detailed accounts of what they saw or felt. They describe floating above their bodies, seeing bright lights, or feeling a deep sense of peace. Doctors argue that these could be hallucinations caused by lack of oxygen in the brain. But some cases go beyond explanation. Patients have described objects in the room or conversations that occurred while they were unconscious. Details later confirmed by doctors and nurses. If their brains were offline, then what was observing? Could it have been the soul? And if that's true, how do we even begin to measure something so elusive? Then there is the question of energy. Physics tells us energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed. When a person dies, the body loses its life force. But where does that energy go? Some scientists argue it simply disperses into heat and movement. But others quietly wonder, could a small part of that energy be something more subtle, something tied to consciousness itself? If energy is eternal, could the soul simply be energy in its purest, most unmeasurable form? And if so, does that mean we never really disappear? Philosophers have also stepped into this debate, reminding us that science alone may never capture the full picture. Consciousness, they argue, is not just about brain chemistry. It's about meaning, identity, and self-awareness. These are things that no microscope can fully explain. Ancient traditions from every culture spoke of the soul as something that exists beyond the body, and now modern science, in its own way, is circling back to similar ideas. Isn't it curious that the oldest wisdom and the newest research are pointing in the same direction? Still, many scientists remain cautious. They remind us that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Until we have experiments that can repeatably prove the existence of the soul, the question must remain open. But at the same time, the sheer number of unexplained experiences, visions, memories, energies, keeps the mystery alive. Maybe the truth lies somewhere between science and spirituality, waiting for us to see it from both sides. Could it be that the answer is not either or, but something more like both and? As technology advances, we may one day come closer to solving this mystery. Imagine brain scans so precise they could track consciousness leaving the body. Imagine physics experiments capable of detecting subtle energies we can't yet measure. Imagine if artificial intelligence gained awareness and forced us to define what a soul truly is. Each of these possibilities edges us closer to an answer. But are we ready for that answer if it comes? In the end, whether scientists have fully proven the soul may not be the point. The real power of this question lies in the journey it inspires, the way it forces us to look deeper into life, death, and everything in between. The mystery itself shapes the way we see ourselves, reminding us that being human is more than just a collection of cells and signals. Maybe the soul is not something to be found, but something we have been living with all along. And if that's true, then perhaps science's greatest discovery will not be proving the soul exists, but realizing that the evidence has been within us the entire time. So the next time you wonder about your thoughts, your dreams, or the spark that makes you you, remember this: science is getting closer, but the ultimate mystery still belongs to each of us. Could it be that the answer has been waiting not in laboratories, but in our own awareness all along? And as we close this journey, let's leave with one thought. The search for the soul may not be about finding something outside of us, but about recognizing the depth within us. Maybe that recognition is proof enough. Thank you for joining me on this exploration. If you found yourself thinking deeper, questioning more, and feeling that quiet sense of wonder, then this journey has done its job. And if you'd like to keep traveling with us through more mysteries of science, mind, and the universe, don't forget to subscribe and join our growing community. After all, the questions don't end here. There's always another mystery waiting just around the corner. Because in the end, the search for truth is endless, and so is curiosity.